In this video, we're going to talk about the solutions to homework 7. Let me get my putty up. And copy over, let's see, count vowels. I'll just do this from scratch. Alright, what are we supposed to do here? Ask the user to type a word, count how many vowels are in the word, and output that to the user. The suggestion is that we have a loop like this. First, we're going to need to get the string from the user. I don't remember exactly what it was supposed to ask, but it will say enter a string. CN. Alright, and then we're going to have some kind of message, some kind of loop here. We have an integer index I that starts at 0, and it goes up by 1 as long as it's less than the size. Just remember, the size of the string is how many characters. So, for example, if message was hello, that's 5 characters. And what is the index of the H? That's 0. E is 1, L is 2, 3, 4. So we want to do the loop as long as I is one of these values. Message.size would be 5, so less than is the right thing. 4 is less than 5. Alright, here we want to look at message I, and we want to test if it's a vowel. We have an if test, so I'm going to say if message I is an A, or message I is an E, or message I is an I, or an O, or a U. Okay, so if one of those is true, then we want to do something. And we're supposed to count, so we need a counter. You have a counter started at 0, add 1 whenever you find the thing you're looking for. Make sure to include both upper and lowercase. So I could have another if like this for uppercase versions, or I can say I can just convert that character to lowercase and then just look at that character. If it happened to be uppercase to begin with, this to lower is one of the functions that we have available if we include string.h. Or you could just copy and paste this if. So you'd have one if for lowercase and one if for uppercase. After the for loop, we output total number of vowels is let's make sure it works. We're supposed to call it doesn't say, we'll call it CV. That's correct, it all looks correct. Alright, so if you want to look at the whole thing, that's the whole answer. If you're going to use this to lower, you include string.h. convert the letter to lowercase, check to see if it's one of the vowels. If it is, increase the counter. This is the kind of thing that you should sort of have memorized. If you can count something going through an array or going through a string, you can have a counter that starts at 0, if test inside, plus plus when you find the ones you're looking for, and your loop is start at 0, go less than the length of the array, less than the length of the string, plus plus. Problem 2 is a large X. The suggestion there is to start with file from class. And before you do anything, you may as well compile it and make sure it works. Okay, so it's doing the top. To do the middle, that's going to be a single star, but we need to put some spaces before it. The way we put some spaces before it is with the for loop. We just have to decide how many. We're going to put some number of spaces, no end line, and then we're going to do the star. And I can do single quotes or double quotes if it's a single character, because see out, here it'll output the character, here it'll output the string. Either way, it'll do the right thing. Okay, so we just have to figure out how many spaces. And the way to figure that out is just to look at a few examples. Alright, when we had height of 5, then that's a single space. So the next line with the star in the middle should be 2. When we had 7, there's 2 spaces, and the next line should be 3. Here when we had 9, there's 3 spaces, and the next line should have 4. Looks like it's half. We would do height over 2. Let's see. That looks okay. So we have the top part, the middle star, and now we want to do the bottom part, which is very similar to this one, except everything is kind of reversed. What I'm going to do is copy and paste this, what we already had, for the top. First thing to do is just run it like that. Okay, so I have the top, and then the middle star, and then the bottom. And if I just switch this so it prints this line first, then this one, then this one, I'll be done. Okay, so I want to switch the order that it prints the rows. This is the loop I'm looking at, and you might take a pause and ask yourself, how do you change it so it switches the order it prints the rows? Right now, when I have row 0, it's printing 0 spaces, and then row goes to 1, it's printing 1 space, and then row goes to 2, it's printing 2 spaces. It goes up to height over 2 minus 1, because it's less than. If I wanted to go in the opposite direction, instead of starting at 0, you might take a pause and see if you can figure it out. Okay, instead of starting at 0, height over 2 minus 1 is the last one it went to. Instead of going less than height over 2, that's where I'm starting, and I'm going to go as long as I'm greater than or equal to 0. And then instead of adding 1, I want to subtract 1. Okay, so this makes row go in the opposite order that it did before. That was the easy way to do it, if you could think that way. Reuse what you already had and just make changes. If you want to deal with this middle star, so if you have an even number, then that looks kind of weird. The right thing to do probably when you have an even height is to not do the star. If you want to not do the star when it's even, then you want an if test. If the height mod 2 is 0, say is 1, then it's odd, and we'll do this. If it's even, then we would skip it. Okay. Now, do you want to know how you would do the loop if you didn't realize that you could just reuse what you had before? Right, let's pretend. Well, first of all, you may want to pause. And this part on the screen here is inside that loop, inside that function, and this is the only thing. These are the things that were added. That would be one solution to the problem in the x function. Now we could take this away, and let's say we didn't think of that, and we were going to do for row equals, here we had row going from 0 to height over 2 minus 1. This middle thing is the row for height over 2 plus 1, if height is odd. And then here we'd be starting with height over 2 plus 2. And then we'd go as long as row is less than height. Row plus plus. First we could just see out a star to see if it's the right number of rows. So this is if you didn't realize that you could reuse what we had before. Let's just figure it out from scratch. We have 2 rows, the middle star, and 1 star. That means we're off by 1 here. Okay, there's 2 stars. I need those 2 rows. And I want to put some number of spaces before them. This one here, the value starts at height over 2 plus 1. And I want there to be 2 spaces, which is like height over 2. I have some number of spaces before this, so I'll say for something about column, and something happens to column. It's going to be less than or greater than, say less than blank. I'm doing some number of spaces before, and let's say that I start column at 0, and I want column to go up to something, and I want some formula so that it's going to be big in the middle and then getting smaller. And if you tried and tried and tried, you might figure to try something like height minus row. Why does that make sense? Because row starts off being half of height, so height minus row would be about half, and row goes up to height minus 1, and then this gets smaller. Let's just try that and see what it looks like. So these are my last 2 rows here, and they're just 1 space too much. These are each 1 space too much as well. So instead of going height minus row, I'll do height minus 1 minus row. That looks good. Now I need to have some number of spaces in the middle. So I have a star there. I'm not going to do my end line yet. I need to have some number of spaces and then after that I'll do my star, my second star and my end line. Alright, now I want my number of spaces to be small here and get bigger. So I could start my column, and let's see, here this goes from 0 up to about height over 2. I could say let's start it at about height over 2 and go up to I want it to be small here and get bigger, maybe go up to row. Because row starts smaller, height over 2, and it goes up to something bigger, height. Let's try it and see. Alright, the number of spaces here is getting bigger. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, but I kind of need like double that or something to get it to go that way. So what if we say do this twice? There's various ways you can do it, but let's just say we do it twice. Then there's just one too many spaces. On one of these I'll do row minus 1. I'll take one space off. And we can also see what happens if we do an even number, and we're missing a row there. Alright, so you could take that as an exercise to fix this code to do it right for even numbers as well. Alright, if you want to look at this version of the code, go ahead and pause your screen. Going to close that. And the next question. Alright, start with the Caesar program and change it. So we'll copy that file. Caesar better. .cpp, and let's look at that. Let's see, the Caesar better program. We ask them if they want to encode or decode. We read a line, which they would type something and press enter. And then if they said encode, we encode. If they said decode, then we decode. We want to change the encode, okay, so that it only so that it doesn't encode vowels. Encode a string. It outputs. First, we output. Ask them for a message. They type it in. Then we're telling them what the message was. We ask them for the password. We encode the message with this Caesar encode. That's where the stuff actually happens. Caesar code. This is where the encoding happens. For each letter in the string, start at 0, go up to the length plus plus. Either we encode it or not. Here we're not encoding alpha. So in here we're encoding, changing the character. So we add we add the password to the character and then make sure that it's still a letter. We need to wrap around, like encoding Z. If you add to Z, you're going to wrap around to A. That's what the second step does. This is the case where we don't do anything, we just add the letter to the string we're building. If we want to make sure that we don't do vowels, we could say char C equals message to lower message bracket I and include string.h. So if it's not an alpha, or C is A, or C is E, or C is I, or C is O, or C is U. If any of those is true, then we're not encoding it, we're just putting it straight through. Let's try that. I'm going to encode. The example here is hello, password 3. Encoded the H. It did not encode the E. It encoded the L's. It did not change the O. That's correct. Now, if we're changing the encode, we should change the decode. With the decode here, the decode, it does the Caesar encode for all possible passwords, and we just changed Caesar encode, so that should still work fine. So if I want to decode, the encoded string was KEOOO. These are all the possible oh, that's different. Okay, so what it's the Caesar encode, it's trying to not decode anything that's a vowel here, and that's actually not the right thing. Alright, but that wasn't part of the question, so we'll leave that as an exercise. Extra credit, we will see. Alright, if you want to look at, this is the only change that we made to the file. The main thing was figuring out where you need to make the change, and the only change was here. This was the if test where punctuation and white space, we just sent it through without changing it, and we're also including vowels. That's the end.